Hello, Caerus. My name is Dr. Ben Rein. I'm a neuroscientist and I work at Stanford University. So what I'm doing, which is called academia, where I want to run my own lab and be a professor at an academic institution, that will require a PhD. There's no way around it. You need to have a PhD. If you have a PhD, you also have the option of going into something called industry, where instead of working at a university, you're working at like a biotechnology company or like a pharmacology, big pharma, as they say, company. So you can be working at something like Pfizer or Thermo Fisher or something like that. And these companies, they always are hiring people to do various jobs. Now the trade-off, and I hope you pay attention to this because this is an important lesson that a lot of people don't get until way too late. The trade-off between academia and industry is this right here. Academia, job stability is roughly better. The reason I say roughly is because it's difficult to get a job, but once you get a job, you can get what's called tenure, where you are basically kept there forever. You have no chance of losing your job. And once you get tenure, you can work for your entire lifetime. And that's why you see a lot of professors working until they're like 95 years old. Because what's the point in quitting? They don't have, no one's going to kick them out, basically. If they're 95 years old and they're doing a terrible job, they have tenure. And that's actually a problem in academia. But on the other side, in industry, they have a problem with a lack of tenure, basically, where from what I've heard, I don't have any experience directly in industry, but you might be, let's say you go to school for neuroscience, you do your PhD in neuroscience, and then you decide that you want to work in industry, and let's say Pfizer, let's say it's 2021, it's right now, Pfizer is developing their COVID-19 vaccine, and they want to hire a branch of their company to study the potential effects of COVID-19 on the brain and these neurological effects, and then they want to compare that to people who have been vaccinated and the effects of the vaccine. You might hire a neuroscientist like you to pursue this or partake in this or lead this project, but the problem is COVID-19 is not going to be the focal point of their company forever, and eventually they're going to have to reevaluate their financial status, and they might say, we're spending too much money on this whole COVID thing, we got to cut that program, and then all of a sudden you're out of a job. And I've heard of that happening, where basically programs get cut, entire groupings of scientists working at these companies can lose their job, and then you're just back on the market. So the likelihood of that happening to you in academia is much lower, which is why it's a lot safer. But once again, there's a trade-off where industry, those positions are paying you a lot more on average. So you're going to be making more money in those positions than in academia. Aside from that, there's a level of freedom that we're talking about too, where in academia, you have the flexibility to study whatever you want. You're running your own lab. You can study whatever that you can get funded for. So if you're applying for grants from the federal government, if they fund your grant that you want to study, whatever it is, you can study that thing with no problem. You make the decisions, you do whatever you want. Whereas in biotechnology and in industry, you have to do whatever, you have a boss who's telling you exactly what you need to do. So you're not as intellectually creative and flexible in that position. So other than that, there's opportunity to do scientific writing, where you can work for let's like a media outlet like The Guardian, and you can write their news articles about science. You can also work so when scientists publish papers, they publish in scientific journals like Cell or Nature or Molecular Psychiatry, just randomly naming journals. Those journals all need to hire people to serve as editors, so that when they get a paper, let's say I'm a scientist, I submit my paper to them, they need someone who's well-versed in science to look over the paper and say, do we even want to consider this paper for publication? And then if they do, the editor manages who the paper gets sent out to, because they send it to other scientists to review it. So they have to choose other scientists, and then when the scientists send the reviews back, they have to go through it and decide, what are we going to do with this? So there are definitely positions within the scientific publication field, but then also positions outside of scientific publication in like journalism and media that you can get positions.